Good morning. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Ixchel Faniel. I'm a senior research scientist at OCLC who examines topics related to user needs and practices and library efforts around open research. So today I'm going to discuss an IMLS-funded study about bringing user perspectives to trusted digital repositories. It's being done in collaboration with Elizabeth Yackel and Lionel Robert at the University of Michigan School of Information. So when we hear this phrase, trusted digital repositories, what comes to mind for many of us is the OAIS. It provides a framework and concepts repositories can use to demonstrate trustworthiness to stakeholders. Most of these studies have focused on demonstrating trustworthiness to certification bodies, which typically focus on the internal workings of a repository. So we can think about the practices, the policies, the procedures. The importance of studying user communities has been discussed since the early 2000s, but there really hasn't been a lot of research to date. So consider this against the recent resurfaced calls about the importance of open research. We can think about UNESCO, and we can think about just different governments around the world. And with these calls comes an increased reliance for digital repositories, specifically data repositories. So today, I'm going to take a data reuser's perspective, and I'm going to talk about the factors related to trust in a digital repository and what that trust does, how that relates, or whether that relates to a data reuser's intention to continue using that repository. So studies about trust in organizations and information systems, it's extensive. We use these studies, as well as the literature in trusted digital repositories, to propose and test a model of data reuser trust. Data reusers were asked questions about a data reuser's integrity, benevolence, transparency, identification, and structural assurance. And we hypothesized that these factors would be related to trust. So when we think about integrity, a repository is said to have integrity when it is what it says that it is. In other words, it's fulfilling its mission to provide long-term access to its user communities, long-term access to data now and into the future. So said another way, its actions are aligned with its words. Benevolence extends beyond the mission to caring about users, who that data is being preserved for. And then transparency provides users visibility and access into the repository's processes and policies and procedures so that they can decide whether or not their needs are being met. Identification is shown through asking for, listening to, and then making changes as a result of user input. And lastly, structural assurance is about showing up at the point of need, addressing problems, answering questions, providing help. Studies show that these factors are significantly related to trust in organizations and information systems, so we're hypothesizing the same for data repositories. For those who remember the early days of online shopping, the question was really whether people were going to be vulnerable in the online exchange of information, goods, and services. For data reusers, the question's the same. Are they willing to accept the vulnerability and take on the risk associated with an online exchange of data, with the expectation that the data repository is going to come through for them? With trust, people are expected to take on risk, right, or a trusted action. In the context of information systems, it's really that initial use or that continued use of that information system over and over again. We hypothesize that trust is positively related to a data reuser's intention to continue using a data repository. We also examined other factors that were seen to be related to continuous intention. For instance, performance expectancy, which considers a data reuser's belief that using a repository will actually improve their job performance. And social factors, which consider influence from their reference group. So for instance, a colleague using or recommending to use a repository. And we hypothesized that both of these factors were also related to a data reuser's intention to continue using that repository over and over again. We also lastly looked at 3 factors that can influence some of these relationships. So relying on others' data to do research creates an interdependence, and which is a condition of trust. So we hypothesized that that would strengthen the relationship between trust and continuous intention. When data are scarce, there are few opportunities to engage with and build trust in a repository. We hypothesized that that scarcity would weaken the relationship between trust and continuous intention. And lastly, with reuse experience, a data reuser becomes skilled when they're deciding whether to use data repositories. So we hypothesized that their experience would actually weaken that relationship between social factors and continuous intention. In 2012, we surveyed almost 1,500 social science researchers who had reused data from a repository. It's called ICPSR. And that survey lasted 6 weeks, and we had about a 16.6% response rate. You see here our results. You'll see the solid lines, which show the significant relationships, and the dotted lines show relationships that were not significant, so they didn't play a role in trust or continuous intention. So looking at trust from left to right, we can see structural assurance, identification, and integrity were significantly positively related to trust. If you look at continuous intention in the lower part of the diagram, and again, looking from left to right, you can see that performance expectancy and trust were significantly positively related to continuous intention. So what are the implications of these findings? I'm going to start with a quote here. And the quote is really describing how trust can be viewed. And it can be viewed as something that's sought or something that's bestowed. So to seek trust from a certification body is one thing. To actually have users gift trust to you such that they're reusing your repository over and over and over again is another thing. They're both equally important, but user trust has gotten less attention to date. Given what we're being asked to continue to do, which is forge a future into open research, attention really has to shift where we're beginning to think about our user communities in those repositories. And my hope is that these findings that I'm presenting will begin to widen our view so that we can encompass both things. So our findings show that data repositories that deliver integrity and identification and structural assurance earn user trust. But what do these factors look like in practice? What actions can repositories actually take? So integrity is about ensuring repository actions are aligned with its words, its stated mission, right? So it's one thing, again, to provide long-term access to data. It's also important to provide data that's findable and interoperable and reusable. And when we think about all of those things, we think about the FAIR data guidelines, which weren't really around when the OIS was developed. So how do those guidelines change your mission? How do you change your approach to your mission in terms of processes and procedures and policies when you're thinking about all four of these things? What do you tell your users? When it comes to identification and structural assurance, ICPSR is an exemplar. It's probably more well-resourced than a lot of repositories, particularly when we're thinking about generalist repositories or institutional repositories at academic institutions. So how might these factors present themselves in these circumstances? So there's extending the mission by working closely with your user base throughout the data lifecycle, encouraging high quality deposits, encouraging ethical reuse of data that benefits society. It's a high reward, but it comes with a lot of work, especially if you don't have a lot of staff. There's also providing consultations and other forms of help or support to users in their moment of need in ways that allow them to build their knowledge to do things better the next time, or to teach those that are coming after them to do better the first time. So it's this idea of making it part of their professional practice. There's other ways that you can identify users as well, and that's turned to research. There's a growing body of research around data reusers' needs. And you can begin to incorporate some of that research into practice. So not too long ago, I collaborated with Lisa Johnston and Katie Whistle that were both members of the Data Curation Network, and we created a feature set based on research about data reusers' needs. And we assessed how repositories supported those needs, and from that assessment, we were able to showcase desirable features in use. So those are just a few examples of just trying to better incorporate users' needs into your repositories, given some of the research that we've done. And I'd love to hear how you're supporting your researchers. So with that, I'll close out with just my acknowledgments again to IMLS, who has been really helpful in this research and moving it forward, as well as references, and see if there are any questions at this time.